Good afternoon. May I request? May I request everybody to take their seat so that we can begin? Thank you. I declare open the first 2025 consultations of the UN Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People with civil society organizations working on the question of Palestine, under the title International Action, Ending the Nakba and Realizing the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. Before we proceed, I would like to note that this event will be webcast live via UN TV. His Excellency Minister Riyad Mansour, Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, members and observers of the committee, representatives of governments, intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, Excellencies, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, it is my privilege to welcome you today to the first committee's consultations for this year to engage with civil society organizations from different parts of the world. I would like to thank the speakers and other participants who have traveled from far to participate in the sessions today. Thank you for making the effort to be here. I now invite Minister Riyad Mansour to deliver his remarks. On behalf of the committee, I thank you, Minister, for being with us today. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I want to welcome everyone in this very important meeting for civil society organizations. I attended the meeting last year in Geneva, and I am happy that this meeting is taking place here in New York at the United Nations. Remarkable things happened during the course of the last year and a half as it relates to the efforts of millions of individuals and hundreds, maybe thousands of organizations in all corners of the globe calling for the end of this genocide against our people in the Gaza Strip. And it was remarkable to see, for example, in the United States, in the streets of almost all cities and in campuses of universities, a massive movement calling for the end of this war, the end of this aggression, calling for ceasefire, and building a movement that was not constructed in the United States for a long, long period of time as it relates to the question of Palestine. I know that during the war in Vietnam, the movement that was established did not want to include justice for the Palestinian people or to consider it as a part of the movement, in spite of the effort of many, especially students at that time, from Palestine and other countries who wanted to include justice for the Palestinian people. The same thing during the civil rights movement. It was not ready to include Palestine as part of the movement. But I think for the last number of years, a movement was established in the United States, and I'm sure many of you who are from that movement here in this room can share with us your ideas, established a movement that included Afro-Americans, Latino Americans, trade unionists, Jewish Americans, especially students in campuses, Arab Americans, Palestinian Americans, Muslim Americans, and from so many different segments in the society, building a massive movement in which Black Lives Matter was a key component of it, that led to a massive social and political movement trying, to advance the agenda of justice in the United States. And when this genocidal war took place in the Gaza Strip, I believe it was ready to embrace justice for the Palestinian people. That's why millions took to the streets, and hundreds of thousands of students took to campuses demanding an end to this war, ceasefire, and flags of Palestine were seen in so many places, from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the North to the South. I'm just only speaking about the United States, since the UN is in New York, and one can see this remarkable movement that was and still is a very important component of the efforts of countries and member states here at the UN to bring an end to this war and to advance the agenda of justice for the Palestinian people, which would mean the attainment of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, including the right to self-determination, statehood, and the right of refugees to return. And I think that we are meeting here today in the midst of this environment, and the work is not finished. In the contrary, we have a lot of things that need to be done ahead of us to bring an end to this war, to have humanitarian assistance to scale to enter the Gaza Strip to save lives of our people who are being exposed to a famine, starvation, to be used as a method of war, which is illegal, inhumane, crime against humanity. And we need to not to allow forced displacement or any kind of displacement against our people, to remove them from Gaza, and then to create the conditions for removing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from the occupied West Bank, and to accomplish the illegal, inhumane piece of legislation which was adopted in the Israeli Knesset, in which they declared from the river to the sea, only Jews are allowed to exercise self-determination. We need to keep our people in our homeland. We have no other homeland except Palestine, and Gaza is a precious part of it. And also to open the door for beginning the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. We need to rebuild it so that people can live in it. And we need also to have a political horizon, and the conference that will take place next month in New York under the co-chairmanship of Saudi Arabia and France for the implementation of the two-state solution. This conference emerged from the historic advisory opinion of the ICJ. I see some faces here that worked with us for a long time, and we've been debating and discussing for at least 10 years. When do we go back to the ICJ? With what questions should we ask? And I think that the moment arrived 2 years ago, and the questions were articulated, not only one question. I see Michael Link here with us, who was part of that journey with us. And we were able, to adopt a resolution asking for these questions. And we had a remarkable journey at the ICJ through the submissions in writing, record numbers, 58 countries, if I'm not mistaken, and the second submission of the same kind, and the oral submissions were so significant that led all to a historic advisory opinion that said, among other things, that this prolonged illegal occupation has to end, and it has to end as quickly as possible. And the ICJ asked to the UN components, including the General Assembly, to adopt the modalities for how to bring this illegal occupation to an end. The General Assembly adopted a resolution calling for the end of this illegal occupation in 1 year, and it called for the convening of this international conference. This conference, the preparation for it is in full swing. It is our collective duty not to make it an ordinary conference where people meet, deliver statements, adopt a declaration, and business is back as usual. This conference is going to be different. We are not going to reiterate the principles that we reiterated in so many resolutions adopted over the years in the General Assembly and the Security Council. This conference is going to be action-oriented. We want from each and every state to tell us what are they committed to in practice to shorten the life of this illegal occupation, to end it. And we want from political grouping and regional groupings to come and tell us what they will be committed for in practical sense in order to shorten the life of this illegal occupation. If some say that we cannot go to the Security Council because of the veto, nothing would prevent countries from acting on their national capacity. We want them to take a crystal clear commitment as to exactly what they will do and commit to through the preparation of this conference, through this conference, in order to say that the international community and the summation of all these commitments are going to put us at the accelerated path of ending this illegal occupation and allowing the Palestinian people to enjoy freedom and dignity in their own independent state. So, while in one hand we need to end this war as quickly as possible, on the other hand, we need also to work for allowing the international community to act on the basis of the historic advisory opinion of the ICJ of ending this illegal occupation. Your work in this connection is extremely appreciated. You can and you are mobilizing millions of people to stop the war, and I am sure that you will be mobilizing millions of people in order to shorten the life of this illegal occupation and to allow the Palestinian people, as part of exercising their right to self-determination, to see the independence of the State of Palestine and its admission to membership at the UN, and to allow us to build our lives in our own independent state that enjoys full sovereignty in order to build the future for our children and for Palestine. We will never vanish. We will not go away. We are Palestinians and we are resilient, and our roots are so deep in our homeland as the roots of our olive trees. I want to welcome you. We want to listen to you. We want to learn from you, and we are partners. We don't tell you what to do, and I'm sure you don't tell us what to do, although if you want to tell us, you are welcome to tell us what to do, but we are together, marching together in order to allow the Palestinian people to realize their inalienable national rights. Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank also the division, in addition to the committee and the Bureau, for making this opportunity with our partners, representative of the civil societies, to have this opportunity to have discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Minister Mansour, for your remarks. The committee appreciates the support and guidance of the permanent mission of the State of Palestine in its work as we all continue to carry the mandate for the realization of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. I will now deliver remarks of the Chair of the Committee for the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today marks 77 years since the Nakba, or catastrophe, amid more than 5 decades of Israeli occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip, 18 months of devastating war on Gaza, and just over 2 months since the collapse of the Gaza ceasefire and the imposition of a total siege that cut off food, fuel, and medicine to the Palestinian population. Since the breach of the ceasefire alone, more than 2,300 Palestinians have been killed, adding to the over 50,000 killed since the beginning of this war. The international community is faced with the painful reality that the Palestinian catastrophe, often referred to as a historical event so many decades ago, is actually an unfolding and ongoing phenomenon with no end in sight. The Nakba was not just the destruction of more than 400 villages and towns and the uprooting of 750,000 Palestinians from their homeland, which would have been horrific enough. We are also marking today that the Nakba continues in different forms, with the tragedy unfolding in Gaza and the continuing annexation of Palestinian lands and the daily settler attacks launched against the Palestinian homes in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Israel's reported plans to forcibly transfer Gaza's populations further aggravate the committee's concerns that the Israeli offensive on Gaza will almost certainly continue, resulting in further mass displacement, civilian casualties, and the destruction of the Strip's remaining infrastructure. Equally alarming is the complete blockade imposed by Israel on the entry of basic assistance for more than 9 weeks already, depriving Gazans of food and life-saving supplies. UNICEF stated that the Israeli proposal to create a handful of 8 hubs exclusively in the south of the Strip would create an, quote, impossible choice between displacement and death, unquote. The committee fully supports the UN Secretary General's position that any aid delivery arrangement that does not fully respect the humanitarian principles of humanity, impartiality, independence, and neutrality should be utterly rejected. Israel, the occupying power, must comply with its obligations under international law and allow unhindered delivery of assistance to Palestinian civilians. The only lasting solution to this crisis lies through full compliance with international law, including the 2024 International Court of Justice Advisory Opinion, which declares the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory as unlawful, and the court's orders on provisional measures. Beyond the war on Gaza, we must continue to advocate for an end to the Israeli occupation throughout the Palestinian territory. In the misery and suffering of the Palestinian people, a glimmer of hope and political will was demonstrated by the international community with the adoption of UNGA Resolution ES 10/24 in September 2024, which operationalized the ICJ advisory opinion and decided to hold the high-level conference on the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine, which will be taking place next month here at UN headquarters. These developments present a timely opportunity to renew our commitment and engage in tangible actions to achieve a sustainable and lasting solution to the question of Palestine, based on the relevant UN resolutions and international law, towards ending the Israeli occupation and realizing the Palestinians' rights to self-determination, statehood, and return. In the more than 70 years since the Nakba of 1948, civil society organizations working on the question of Palestine have become increasingly active, playing a vital role in informing and enlightening member states about the impact of Israeli occupation, ongoing violations, and the brutal military aggression launched over a year and a half ago. Their role has undeniably grown in significance amid recent developments. The committee, established by the General Assembly in 1975, organizes international meetings in various regions to promote constructive discussions of the various aspects of the question of Palestine and to mobilize international support for and assistance to the Palestinian people. As a General Assembly committee, we take pride in continuing our engagement with civil society organizations worldwide as they pursue human rights advocacy and deliver essential services amidst worsening conditions and restrictions caused by the Israeli occupation. We are pleased to host our CSO partners every year. We are encouraged by the growth in global solidarity movements, which mirror the voices of member states in the UN that are calling for justice. On behalf of the committee, I invite all of you, member states and civil society representatives gathered here today and tomorrow to synergize efforts and to recommit to push for an immediate end to the hostilities in Gaza and the independence of the State of Palestine in line with global consensus. I thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the opening session of our consultations. Now the deliberations will commence. I invite you to actively participate in the discussions and make viable and practical recommendations that can help bring accountability for the ongoing Israeli violations in the occupied Palestinian territory, particularly in the Gaza Strip, and to prompt tangible actions from member states. In the interest of time and to allow for a rich discussion in Plenary 1, which will commence immediately after this opening session, we invite all those representatives of member and observer states and intergovernmental organizations who prepared statements to send their statements to the Division of Palestinian Rights of the United Nations Secretariat. They will then be posted on the committee's website. Please be reminded that simultaneous interpretation is provided in 6 languages this afternoon: Arabic, English, Chinese, French, Russian, and Spanish, to accommodate all interventions of our panelists and esteemed audience. All participants are also encouraged to disseminate information about the event on their social media and use the hashtag #RightsForPalestine. We shall now invite the panelists to take their seats at the podium, and we'll then immediately continue with our proceedings. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished experts and honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to the first 2025 consultations with civil society organizations organized by the United Nations Committee for the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. We are ready to begin our deliberations with the first plenary session entitled The Ongoing Palestinian Nakba. I would like to welcome our distinguished speakers who are going to share their valuable knowledge. We will first hear our speakers, and then I will open the floor for questions and comments from participants. I would also like to remind our speakers to stay within the 7 to 9 minutes time limit set by the organizers for this panel, so that we have enough time for discussion. The theme of our plenary is the ongoing Palestinian Nakba, and panelists today are representing civil society organizations from Palestine, Israel, and the United States. The first panelist is Mr. Ahmad Masood, an academic and writer who is joining us via video teleconference. Mr. Masood is a Palestinian and British writer, theater maker, and academic who was born in Gaza and grew up in Jabalia refugee camp. Now he is based in London. He has written 2 novels, created a number of dance shows, and 3 plays: Go to Gaza, Drink the Sea, Wala, and The Shroud Maker. It is a pleasure to have you join this panel, Mr. Masood. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for having me today. Very much appreciated. And apologies for not being with you in person. I would have loved to be with you today. However, I was actually worried about border crossing and all the stories that we've heard about Palestinians and others who might get detained crossing to the US. I want to start by saying that today has been an incredibly difficult day for me because my sister-in-law and my nephew, my 17-year-old nephew, were killed today by an Israeli strike. My sister-in-law was a teacher and she was volunteering to help kids in the camp to learn maths, and took her son, 17-year-old math genius, Mahmoud, and they were both killed in an Israeli airstrike. I'm going to read my statement now. Today, I'm in pain. I mourn the loss of my sister-in-law, Ibtisam, and her 17-year-old son, my nephew, Mahmoud. His father, my own brother, Khalid, and Ibtisam's husband, was killed in January 2024. So the 3 of them are now killed. They were killed by an Israeli airstrike in Jabalia, where I grew up and where my family is right now. She was a teacher volunteering to help kids with math. Israel doesn't just kill children, but everyone else who's trying to help them too. Both of them were killed today on the 77th anniversary of the Nakba, the events of 1948, which are the reasons of what's happening today. The events that led to the creation of an apartheid state called Israel. The events that we Palestinians have been telling you about for the last 77 years. No one listened to our stories. No one paid attention to our voice. No one did anything to change the harsh reality that we have been living. I wrote stories, novels, theater plays. I spoke, I wrote poetry, I wrote words. I told my grandfather's stories and how he was ethnically cleansed from his home of Der Sneid in 1948, now part of Israel. Others made films, wrote academic books, presented statistics, tried to highlight the injustice that we have been living in, and no one has done anything. It feels like we are subhumans to everyone else. I urge you to think about this for a few seconds. I beg you to picture a child, me, born in 1981 in a refugee camp called Jabalia in the north of Gaza. My memory of Jabalia camp actually is just being cold all the time with no food. I remember queuing for hours at the UN center to get our rations of basic supplies, and that was back in the 80s. I remember having no choice. Every single choice is made for you, even the clothes that you wear. I was born to an educated father who studied Arabic literature and a grandfather who was once wealthy in his own land of Palestine, owning acres and acres of beautiful olive groves and a grand Jerusalem stone house, which he inherited from his father and his grandfather and his great-great-grandfather. Suddenly, he's a refugee with nothing. Yes, he builds a tent in Jabalia, and a few decades later, I am born. We insist that we have the right to return to our original home, but we are never allowed. Yet we build a life there. We want to live. We want to be like everyone else. Then the first Intifada happens in 1987. And the brutal Israeli occupation forces arrest and shoot whoever they want. They break our bones. They beat us. They divide Gaza. More checkpoints, more settlements built. Then we have Oslo, and we hope that this is it. Peace is coming at last. I go out on the street in Jabalia camp, and I remember dancing Debka on the streets, only for the sound of the music to be silenced by the Israeli F-16 fire jets in the second Intifada of the year 2000. More checkpoints, a siege on Gaza in 2006, an Israeli onslaught in 2006, followed by another one in 2008, and another one in 2012, and the world did nothing. The world allows Israel to kill over 2,000 people in 2014, and nothing changes. More killing and siege, and another war in Gaza in 2021. And we let Israel break every single international law. That's why we are here today. Then they start the genocide in October 2023, and the world sits back and watches. The media gives them the cover that they need. We let them go into hospitals, destroy schools, every single infrastructure, and we still watch. We read reports about soldiers raping Palestinian prisoners, and we do nothing. In October 2023, Israeli bombs an entire block in Jabalia of the house where I grew up. 13 of my cousins were killed in one hit, and over 100 people were killed in one single bombing, and that was in October 2023. And nothing changes. Then they bomb Al Ahli hospital and kill 500 people in one go, and Western media invites them to explain it live on air. Before the ceasefire earlier this year in January, Jabalia was under one of the worst sieges in history. For weeks, Israel besieged the entire camp. My sister Hind was there all the way until the last 2 weeks before the ceasefire, when she finally left. She described her journey of how she walked with 5 young children for miles to get to beach camp in Gaza, of how Israeli soldiers took the only bottle of water from her and emptied it right in front of her eyes and laughed. I have WhatsApp voicemails of that day when she told me that. She described to me how they threatened of raping her right in front of her children. I pray you to think of these children who are currently starving. She tells me she can't find food for them anywhere. One of them is severely ill due to starvation. Today is a very difficult day for me. My sister-in-law has been killed, and my nephew has been killed. They didn't need to die. It's our inaction that led to this. But today I'm addressing you because our voice is important. Our story is important. Our lives are important, and you can make a difference. And I beg you to do anything you can to stop this killing machine and to save the rest of my family. I want to end, if I may, with this poem I wrote to remind everyone here that we are humans and we love to. And for some of you, you may recognize the inspiration of this poem. It's called Yet Still I Run. And I wrote this straight after the ceasefire, when I was jubilant about the idea that the war might finally end. Yet still I run. I run to you from Khan Yunis to Jabalia, steps entangled with 300,000 other feet, all hurrying, longing, dreaming, a unified mass, a human avalanche, from south to north. Inhale, exhale, parched mouths, smelly breaths. but the sea breeze washes them away. Only I have you waiting on the finishing line. Only I am composing lyrics in my mind. I can't make them rhyme or put them into neat words. I'm thinking of metaphors, but the tense in Al-Mawasi kept my imagination. I run and think. Will you kiss my sweaty face? Will you remember my eyes? Rubble is everywhere. Dust. From Wadi Gaza to Abu Mazen roundabout. My nose is pinched, my heart is squeezed, yet still I run. Past Yasser Arafat's compound, past Al-Shalihat, where you and I once swam and kissed for the first time. Rubble carpets everything. Past Al-Azhar University, where young lovers once stood, dreamy faces of peace, where you and I once led a demonstration. Nothing is left of it there. No beautiful people, no grumpy lecturers, no more noisy street settlers, no more street sellers, hassling taxi drivers, falafel smell, donkey carts, yet still I run to Al-Fallujah in Jabalia camp, where they told me you would be. Nothing is familiar. I'm losing my sense of direction, yet still I run. Headstones, broken olive trees, tanks, marks on the ground, everything is dark. The flowers in my hand look sad. I count 2, 3, 4 graves. Yours is the last grave on the right corner, they said, yet still I run to the far corner. I imagine you sitting under a tree, smiling, asking me why I was late, 15 months late, yet still I run, yet still I hope to find your body one day. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope the meeting continues to go well, and I'm sorry that I have to go now and be with the family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Masood, for being with us this afternoon to share your extremely moving story in such difficult and painful circumstances. And thank you also for that beautiful poem. You are absolutely right. Your voice is important. I wish to extend our deepest condolences to you and your family on the death of your sister and nephew. Rest assured that we in the committee will do our utmost to bring this senseless war and the illegal occupation to an end so that you can visit your family and your beloved homeland in Gaza again soon. Thank you. We shall continue with our second speaker, Ms. Maya Yavin, a political and human rights activist, educator, and independent filmmaker. Working within activist communities, she focuses on struggles for justice, truth, and liberation. A graduate of Bezalel Academy of Arts and Design in Jerusalem, Ms. Yavin combines filmmaking, education, and grassroots activism. As a member and now director of Zochrot, she continues to take part in collective efforts to confront the ongoing Nakba, challenge dominant narratives, and champion for the possibilities for return and decolonization. It is a pleasure and honor to have you as the new director of Zochrot, Madam. The floor is yours.
Especially following Ahmed's testimony. The live-streamed genocide in Gaza confronts us all with a devastating truth. And as someone who is part of the society committing these crimes, I cannot separate myself from what is unfolding. My name is Maya, and while I speak as an individual, I carry the voices of other Jews living across the land, from the river to the sea, who oppose these ongoing atrocities, mass killings, forced displacement, and systematic oppression of Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, and within Israel's 1948 borders. I was raised in a hyper-militarized culture that taught me to see violence as normal and oppression as security. At times, the shame, anger, and grief leave me speechless. But silence is not an option. In a world where never again is repeated without meaning, Our moral obligation is clear. We must speak and take action to confront the ongoing institutionalized violence against the Palestinian people. As director of Zechot, an organization committed to exposing the ongoing Nakba in Hebrew and advocating for the Palestinian right of return, as well as promoting accountability among the Jews in Israel, I recognize it's a lifelong process to confront painful truths and unlearn Zionism. Zechot's work challenges dominant narratives and helps envision decolonized futures. But today, naming the Nakba or supporting the right of return is increasingly dangerous as extremist ideologies fuel repression, silencing dissent, and dehumanizing Palestinians. Amid a global trend of shrinking civic space, the Israeli government has passed laws targeting civil society organizations and uses defunding as a political weapon. In the face of increasing criminalization and repression of dissenting voices, exposing the truth is indeed a radical and revolutionary act. And this truth begins with the Nakba. Remembering the Nakba is not merely a historical reflection, it's a key to understanding the catastrophe unfolding in Gaza today. This is not a rupture from the past. It is its continuation. The violent logic of erasure and displacement began with the Zionist colonial occupation of Palestine. In 1948, over 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced and more than 600 villages destroyed. The atrocities included massacres, instances of rape, looting, as well as the systematic destruction of homes and forced expulsion. Gaza became a refuge for many of these survivors. Today, over 70% of Gaza's population are 1948 refugees or their descendants, living under siege, denied citizenship, and the right to return to their original homes. The Zionist-made Gaza Strip endured repeated military assaults and deprivation, but the current campaign stands apart in its scale and explicit intent. Israeli officials themselves have referred to it as Gaza Nakba 2023, underscoring the continuity between the Nakba of 48 and today's mass displacement. On October 7, 2023, the Hamas-led attacks killed hundreds of Israeli civilians in a massacre that involved serious violations of international law and fundamental moral principles, including the abduction of civilians, some of whom remain captive to this day. The Israeli government has weaponized these attacks to justify a relentless campaign of destruction in Gaza. Tens of thousands have been killed, entire neighborhoods flattened, families uprooted once again in a deliberate strategy of ethnic cleansing. Under the guise of security, Israel has unleashed unprecedented violence on a captive population, turning collective grief into a pretext of mass devastation. In the occupied West Bank as well, violence has sharply escalated, with hundreds of Palestinians killed and land seizures on a scale not seen in decades. Refugee communities are again uprooted, and UNRWA, the agency supporting them, is under attack. Backed by the U.S., Israel is dismantling not just Palestinian infrastructure, but the institutions affirming their rights. This is a clear manifestation of apartheid, as defined under international law, a system that privileges Jewish lives over Palestinian ones through violence, legal discrimination, and territorial control. From Haifa to Jenin, from Jaffa to Gaza. It's also evident where Israel claims full sovereignty, like the Nakab, through home demolitions, settlement expansions, discriminatory laws, and restrictions on Palestinian development. It is sustained by fragmentation, isolating Palestinians from one another to suppress unity and resistance. Most starkly, the denial of return for 9 million refugees is central to Israel's demographic strategy, keeping them exiled and disconnected. Refugee camps across the region stand as enduring symbols of the colonization and apartheid systems on which the state of Israel is based. At the heart of any just resolution lies the right of return, a fundamental human right recognized in international law, enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Fourth Geneva Convention, and UN Resolution 194, which Israel accepted upon joining the UN but has never implemented. The denial of this right is not upheld by Israel alone, but also by powerful states that, through silence, military and financial support, have enabled a system that prevents Palestinian refugees from returning. Their complicity turns a legal right into a political taboo, reinforcing apartheid and impunity. Yet the right of return remains both viable and vital, especially for refugees in Gaza, for whom it is a matter of survival and dignity. many of their original lands remain uninhibited or are now forests, parks, or military zones. Practical solutions exist and must be negotiated by the refugees themselves. This issue extends beyond Israel, with international actors like the Jewish National Fund, active worldwide, playing a key role in Palestinian dispossession. The JNF has long collaborated with the Israeli state to explicitly erase Palestinian localities, cover destroyed villages with forests, and acquire land through discriminatory means. The JNF operates not just in Israel, but across the US, Europe, UK, Canada, and beyond, fundraising and maintaining tax-exempt status in countries that claim to uphold human rights. We call on UN member states to take immediate action to end this complicity by revoking the JNF's charitable status and holding it accountable for its ongoing role in the ethnic cleansing and erasure of the Palestinian people. In June, France and Saudi Arabia will host a conference aimed at reviving the two-state solution. We must state clearly that any political framework overlooking Palestinian refugeehood would repeat and reproduce failures of the past, failures that have led us only to more death and destruction. Sustainable liberation and safety for all, Palestinians, Jews, and others, will come only as a result of dismantling of Zionist supremacy. The right of return is at the center of this condition, as negating it means normalizing the colonial violence and the inability of the majority of Palestinian people to shape its own destiny. Zionism has intentionally framed the Palestinian return as synonymous with the end of Jewish existence. But the opposite is true. It is preventing refugee return that constitutes an ongoing existential threat to all of us. Therefore, we call on the UN member states to act, to support the establishment of a robust international mechanism, not only to monitor apartheid, but to investigate, prevent, and punish it as a crime under international law, including the systematic denial of the right of return, and to support the General Assembly's action to suspend Israel's participation in the United Nations due to its ongoing violations of international law, including its failure to uphold the conditions of its UN membership, among them the implementation of the Palestinians' right of return. This is an urgent matter rooted in long-standing documented breaches of the UN Charter. At Zachot, as Jewish people living in Israel, we reject colonial frameworks that prioritize one group over another. We urge the United Nations and the international community to immediately halt Israel's genocidal violence, actively support the Palestinian right of return, and work toward a future where Palestinians and Jews alike can live in justice and equality. Decolonization is the only framework that addresses the root cause of injustice. A decolonized future is not a threat, but a promise of shared life, justice, and collective liberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yavin. Your presentation sheds light on the important work Israeli NGOs are doing for the realization of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, and particularly in investing in the remembrance of the Nakba of 1948 and raising awareness on the continued displacement and dispossession of the Palestinian people. Thank you. And now, to continue with our plenary session, allow me to introduce our third speaker, Ms. Zaha Hassan, a human rights lawyer and a fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Her research focus is on Palestine-Israel peace, the use of international legal mechanisms by political movements, and U.S. foreign policy in the region. Previously, she was the coordinator and senior legal advisor to the Palestinian negotiating team during Palestine's bid for UN membership and a member of the Palestinian delegation to Quartet-sponsored exploratory talks between 2011 and 2012. She regularly participates in Track 2 peace efforts and is a contributor to The Hill and Haaretz. Her commentaries have appeared in the New York Times, Salon, Al Jazeera English, CNN, and many others. It is a pleasure and honor to also have you again with us here today. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks to His Excellency, Chair of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, for inviting me to be a part of this commemoration and yet another year of ongoing Nakba, one that takes place in the midst of what has become an undeniable genocide in Gaza. My heartfelt thanks also go to His Excellency, the State of Palestine's representative to the United Nations, Minister Riyad Mansour. Minister Mansour, your tireless work and courage have been really inspiring, and it is the pride of Palestinians everywhere. I can't think of a more difficult job at the UN than yours at this time. The grace and humility you bring to the mission is not only a service to Palestine, it's a service to humanity and to the defenders of human rights and universal values the world over. The Palestine mission and the entire team is on the front lines of ensuring that the UN and its founding principles do not become quaint relics of the past. I'm also very honored to be among the experts and human rights defenders joining me on the dais and participating in this conference. I wish that Ahmed was here so that I could meet him in person. His pain and suffering is a testament to why we're here today, and I send him all love from afar. I want to spend the next few minutes I have in my opening remarks to offer a reflection on something that has been hanging in the air for me for the last 19 months, but that I have not had time to fully consider. As a lawyer and a political analyst, I've been consumed with responding to developments of the moment and trying to figure out how we can stop the bloodshed and get to a permanent ceasefire, where the current events might be taking Palestinians in the future, and where they might be taking the international system writ large. More than a commemoration, May 15th offers us a moment to stop what we've all been consumed with, take a breath and look back. In doing so, I'm immediately struck with how very strange it is to talk about the Nakba or commemorate it as an event of the past. Of course, it had a beginning. We pinpoint it on May 15th, 1948, but it began before that date and is ongoing, as so many speakers have rightly recognized. It is something that lives and breathes and that has been evolving in its monstrous methods and modalities and growing in its frightening efficiency. The term Nakba was first used to refer to the period between November 29, 1947, when the partition of Palestine was recommended by the General Assembly, and the year following Israel's founding, when over 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced from their homes and lands to create a Jewish majority state. The methods to force Palestinian flight involved massacres, rapes, and the threats of the same. However, the displacement of Palestinians from their land inside Israel continued even after 1949. It took the form of controlling and dispossessing the remaining Palestinian population through legal mechanisms and by privileging Jewish nationality over Israeli citizenship. The 1967 displacement of over 250,000 Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza is generally referred to as the Nakba, or shock, but it was a continuation of the Nakba. We know from Israeli archives and the work of Professor Ilan Pape that the plans to occupy the West Bank and Gaza were prepared in the late 1950s after Israel's temporary occupation of Gaza in 1956, following the French, British, and Israeli attack on Egypt. In 1967, Israeli leaders did not think the same tactics of 1947 through 1949 could be deployed to force the remaining Palestinians off their land. They were afraid of the international outcry. And so other mechanisms were used: land confiscations, mass detentions, residency revocations, deportation, and movement and access restrictions. All were used to encourage Palestinians to leave. A separate legal regime was put in place to differentiate between Israeli settlers and Palestinians, a regime the World Court has told us in 2024 amounts to apartheid. And since October 2023 in Gaza, we are seeing genocide used as another tactic. In the West Bank, we are witnessing a campaign to depopulate refugee camps and rural communities. amounting to ethnic cleansing. If we agree that the Nakba is ongoing and not a static moment in time, we have to rethink the notion of how we commemorate the day, May 15th. Nakba isn't a single event. It has become a criminal enterprise that began almost 80 years ago, consisting of a series of tactical war crimes aimed at the erasure of the indigenous population of Palestine and their history. Rabia Ighbariya, a Palestinian legal scholar based at Harvard, proposes that we think about Nakba as its own legal concept, including unlawful occupation, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and genocide. These crimes were not linear. They were deployed in cycles and in different moments in time and to different degrees. We should recall in this regard that the UN General Assembly found that the Sabra Shatila massacre in 1982 constituted a genocide against part of the Palestinian people. What is different today is that the mechanisms being used are much more efficient in effecting erasure of Palestinians from their land, and the control over the population is much more severe and complete. Technologies, including AI, mass surveillance systems, tracking and hacking software, facial recognition to control movement and access, and disinformation, misinformation, and censorship online and in traditional media exist today. New technologies have increased the speed and the rate of killing to make the atrocities seen in the last 19 months of the war on Gaza and the ongoing destruction of Palestinian communities in the West Bank and in Lebanon and Syria much more deadly than the crimes committed between 1947 and 1949. But there is something else going on beyond the control and removal of Palestinian communities. How has it been possible after the lessons of World War II and its atrocities that Western governments have been effectively silenced or immobilized in responding to the atrocities going on in Gaza and around the Middle East? How is it that so many of them continue to transfer weapons for those atrocities or still refer to Israeli actions as self-defense or within the bounds of international humanitarian law? How was this grooming of these states made possible such that they could not only accept the atrocities being committed today in Gaza and the region, but also work to silence civil society within their own national jurisdictions to prevent them from protesting in support of policy change? How were the laws of war and legal concepts misused and turned on their heads so that everything done by the occupying power became justifiable? These things are part of the criminal enterprise that is the Nakba, and it too deserves to be studied as we rethink what the term Nakba encapsulates. As Rabia argues, Nakba should no longer be thought of as a proper noun. In fact, it is a verb. It involves a series of systemized violent actions conducted over time by a settler colonial regime. But in addition to the series of crimes involved, unlawful occupation, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and genocide, I believe we also need to begin to examine how international law has been misapplied, disregarded, and undermined as a part of the Nakba of Palestinians. In the UN system, within national governments, and against civil society. This, I believe, has been an essential part of the success of the Nakba, the undermining of international law. As Noura said earlier, the failure to protect Palestinian rights is not only a Palestinian catastrophe, it's dangerous to all humanity. How do we right course and recalibrate towards respect for international law is a question that this body, this institution, is uniquely qualified to answer, and it should be a question that's posed to the Global Alliance convening in New York next month. Commemorations of Nakba should not only be a time for looking back and taking stock, they should also be opportunities for collective thinking to understand how the ongoing Nakba is threatening to unravel our international system and what can be done collectively to protect and preserve the UN institutions and universal norms. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hassan, for your very informative and compelling analysis of the recent political development. Indeed, Nakba is no longer just a proper noun, it is a verb. And I think you have raised many pertinent points that will surely trigger many questions in our discussion later. Thank you. It is my pleasure now to present to you our last speaker for this panel, Ms. Tamara Karoub, Deputy Director of the Arab Center, Washington, D.C. Her research focuses on the intersection of technology and human rights and democracy in the Middle East and North Africa. She publishes research, policy analysis papers, and editorials exploring the role of media and communication technology in the political process, including issues of digital authoritarianism and repression, disinformation and information environments, cyber power and geopolitics, surveillance technologies, propaganda and media representation, identity politics online, artificial intelligence and autonomous weapons, and digital rights, in addition to research on Palestine, Israel, and U.S. foreign policy in the region. Ms. Karoub, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to my co-panelists for their insightful and moving remarks, and thanks to the committee and the organizers for inviting me. I want to start by reiterating that the anniversary of the Nakba marks not only the event or one event in Palestinian history and catastrophe, but represents an ongoing process of the violent dispossession of the Palestinian people and systemic destruction of Palestinian life and existence, of Palestinian society, identity, and culture, and of Palestinian political and human rights and national aspirations that have been going on for nearly 8 decades. And today in Gaza, we see how this ongoing Nakba has taken on new and horrifying dimensions, with massacres taking place as we speak against defenseless civilians. The numbers are estimated at 53,000 at least killed, the majority of whom women and children, including the targeting of health and aid workers and journalists. Widespread destruction and displacement, in addition to mass starvation, siege, and the deliberate blocking of life-saving aid. And the most important note here to point to is that this is not an accident of war, just as it was not accidental in 1948 and thereafter. This is a deliberate Israeli policy of colonialism and ethnic cleansing. To be sure, this is an ongoing calculated policy focused on the erasure of Palestinians by design and should be treated as such. And here I would like to outline maybe some of the Israeli strategies and practices of the extermination of the Palestinian people, and perhaps to contextualize some of what has been said in terms of stories and events. Forcible displacement and land confiscations have been a landmark of Israeli policy in order to take as much land as possible and remove as many Palestinians as possible. We saw that happen in 1948, and we see that happening today in Gaza, where 1.9 million people, 90% of the population, have been displaced, many of whom multiple times. And this extends to the West Bank today, which some Israeli officials have referred to as the Gazification of the West Bank, referring to the genocidal war in Gaza. From Hebron to Masafer Yatta to East Jerusalem to Jenin. In the north part of the West Bank, 40,000 Palestinians have been displaced from refugee camps, which is the biggest mass displacement since 1967 in the West Bank. But also, Israel is using the destruction of means of life as a policy to make the Palestinian territories unlivable for Palestinians. With mass starvation, siege, and blocking aid, today most families in Gaza live on one meal every 2 to 3 days, often shared among multiple family members, which is causing acute malnutrition, especially among children, and long-term consequences, including mental, psychological, physical effects. Needless to say, weaponizing starvation and aid are both war crimes. In the West Bank, the daily machinery of the occupation and military checkpoints are suffocating Palestinian life and basing human rights in every aspect of life. Israel also uses destruction of structures and properties in order to liquidate the Palestinian right of return, so people have nothing to return back to. We saw that in 1948 with the destruction of more than 500 Palestinian towns and villages, and we're seeing that today in Gaza, where 70% of all structures have been destroyed or damaged, and 92% of housing units, and so are most of health facilities, primary roads, and water and sanitation plants. But also the destruction of 3 refugee camps in the north of the West Bank is part of this strategy to liquidate the Palestinian right of return. Systemic violence against Palestinians has been an Israeli policy of annihilation and inflicting fear, including massacring of civilians, arbitrary killings, and state-backed settler violence. As a result of this, entire families in Gaza have been wiped off the map. Additionally, Israel uses arbitrary detention and torture. More than 9,000 Palestinian detainees are stuck in Israeli military prisons without due process, charge, or trial, or access to a lawyer, including children and minors, with very well-documented physical, psychological, torture, and sexual violence. There were 1 million detention cases of Palestinians since 1967. This reality and policies are shocking in and of themselves. But what is more shocking is the fact that this has been allowed to go on for almost 8 decades, with Israel enjoying full impunity, enabled by the political and financial support and diplomatic cover of Western democracies and the inaction of the international community. What is happening in Palestine is one of the most documented atrocities in history. There is no lack of evidence and documentation. For decades, we watched the live stream genocide unfold in the palms of our hands in real time. The legal implications couldn't be clearer, and yet this goes on. And looking at the international scene, none of this would have been possible without the support, complicity, and inaction of the global governance system, not only in the failure to protect Palestinians, but also the active denial of any means for Palestinians to protect themselves. One component of this failure is the widespread epistemic violence against the Palestinians and the Palestinian narrative globally, especially the silencing and blocking and shutting down of Palestinian voices. These multifaceted attacks on the Palestinian perspective and agency have been exacerbated by the persistent dehumanization and anti-Palestinian racism that have been normalized in mainstream discourse, which has served to mislead the public, whitewash Israeli crimes, justify injustice, contribute to the climate of impunity, and enable the continuation of the Nakba and the genocide in Gaza. And on this note, I would say it's critical at this time to address the dehumanization of Palestinians and the normalization of anti-Palestinian racism, and to pursue official measures to criminalize and prevent this discourse. And the more important component here is something that's been mentioned, I think, extensively throughout the day, and it's the failure of the global order and the selective application and enforcement of international law. The Nakba continues because international law has been applied selectively and because the mechanisms of global governance have too often failed to match their principles with action. The genocide in Gaza has exposed the failures of the international legal system and the shortcomings of the norms and principles that govern it. The failure to uphold international law in Palestine and in Gaza in particular are promoting the erosion of this Western-led post-World War II order, which enshrined humanitarian protections into international law. And as has been already said, this will have wider lasting implications for justice efforts around the world, far beyond Gaza and well after this war. What is at stake is not only the fate of a people, as important as that is, and that's why we're here, but the credibility of the international system itself and the legitimacy and relevance of international law. And I would offer maybe a recommendation to save this international justice system. And as unrealistic as that sounds, it is high time to reform the international order and confront the inequalities that produce this system, particularly reforming its financial dependence on large powers, decentering the political, media, military, and economic elites of the global north, and breaking the monopoly over international affairs. We need to ensure the fair and enforceable application of international law and accountability measures. But in the meantime, individual states, especially small and medium states in the global south, who have taken important actions over the past 18 months with regard to the genocide in Gaza, can act outside of the constraints of this global order. They can take measures like diplomatic sanctions and cutting ties, arms embargoes, bringing on and implementing cases at the ICC and the ICJ, like they have done, recognizing Palestine, among others. Today, we still hear statements that could have been delivered 30 years ago or more, and probably have been, about the two-state solution, the settlements, and the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. It is evident that Israel has managed to dictate the terms of reference and continues to lower the bar for what Palestinians should accept. This was the problem with the partition plan before 1948 and after. This was the problem with the two-state solution, and this is the problem now. Now we are at a point where ending the starvation of 2 million people in Gaza would be considered a global accomplishment. And while this is a very important and urgent matter, Palestinian rights should not be reduced to humanitarian relief and a state minus. Today, even discussions about the ceasefire in Gaza and Israeli withdrawal have taken a back seat, let alone the issue of giving the people of Gaza a chance at life, ending the occupation and the system of apartheid, and fulfilling Palestinian rights and statehood. We must not fall for this. It is time now, more urgent than ever, for the international community to act and enact serious and practical mechanisms to protect Palestinians, but also to take a proactive role in enforcing international law and human rights principles and real progress towards justice. It is my hope and recommendation that the international conference in June is seen as an opportunity for new approaches and for action beyond the usual statements of condemnation and denunciations, and for pursuing alternative efforts and rights-based solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haroub, for the also very informative update on the situation on the ground and for your political insights. You've also given us a lot to ponder, and I'm sure that your recommendation for reform of the international order resonate with many attendees, and will definitely trigger a robust discussion later. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to start our discussion. Participants are welcome to ask questions or make comments on the presentations of our guest speakers. We shall take a few questions from the audience at a time, then our speakers will have the opportunity to respond. Please introduce yourselves at the beginning and make your interventions as brief as possible. The floor is now open for questions. Gentleman on our left, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Thair Ahmed. I'm an emergency medicine physician based in Chicago, and I am a physician that has served in Gaza last year in 2024 at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, as well as Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. I come today with a reminder of understanding what has taken place in Gaza over the last 19 months as not just isolated incidents of violations of international humanitarian law, of not just moments that have been seen as headlines and then passed. It is essential for us to understand the totality of the devastation, to understand the nuance, to see the humans past the number, the tens of thousands of Palestinians that have been slaughtered in the last 19 months. And I urged for all of us to maintain a degree of urgency with what has taken place. The last 24 hours, we watched over 100 Palestinians get slaughtered. We've seen in the last few days more than 4 hospitals that I've worked at, get struck with missiles. And of course, there is no accountability, but there's no mention of the victims who have suffered as a result of this. There is no talk of what will happen to them now that these hospitals are out of commission. Frankly, we don't have time until next month to be thinking about what we can do now, what we can do tomorrow. Time is running out. You know, there's a thing that we do here in the United States oftentimes at events. We acknowledge the indigenous people that used to be on this land. And I fear that if we maintain the same level of paralysis, that if we are not acting, that we will be doing the same in Jenin and in Gaza and in other parts of what we once knew as Palestine. I also want to reiterate that I feel that this new aid modality that is being pitched, there is mention of the need for increased aid into Gaza. Absolutely. The need for food. Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. But this idea of a new aid modality, of these distribution centers, of the ghettoization of Palestinians in Gaza, needs to be flatly rejected and recognized for what it is. It is another arm of occupation. It is the militarization of humanitarian aid. How can we expect that the people who have committed the atrocities over the last 19 months to suddenly say it's okay for Palestinians to be getting food and medicine, to be packaging food and saying that's enough? Can we expect them to not suddenly say, I think that's enough food for today or this week or this month, and starve the Palestinians again? And as a medical professional, it is very important that we all recognize that severe acute malnutrition and starvation is not simply giving people food and letting them eat. It is a medical emergency. They need monitoring. You cannot just give food for 50 days like we saw in a ceasefire and then suddenly cut it off and expect for them to be okay. They got enough food for that time period. They'll survive the next 7 or 8 weeks of pure starvation. It doesn't work like that. I say this as someone who also recognizes the need for access. March 13th, 5 days before the escalations, 5 days before the ceasefire was violated, I was in Jordan ready to go back into Gaza, and I was denied under the premise of security reasons, like many other medical professionals. Myself, because I am a Palestinian. But oftentimes, the denial can be arbitrary. The access is limited. We have to push back on that. There needs to be a way for us to recognize that access into the Gaza Strip is just as important as aid, and that for the people to be able to go in and out is a right that they should be enshrined and should not be used as a weapon of war, not be used as a way to punish and make them suffer. I say this as somebody who walked over the body of a dead child while the mother was grieving to treat another patient in Nasser Hospital. I say this as somebody who didn't get a chance to wipe the blood off of a 5-year-old who had died in an Israeli airstrike because there were too many patients in the emergency room of Nasser. I say this as a Palestinian who yesterday had to watch a mother say that she found the body of her child outside of their house but could not find his head, and spent the entire night with a flashlight going through the streets, roaming through the streets of Khan Yunis, hoping to find his head but being unsuccessful. I say this as somebody who saw a child who was born right after the ceasefire broke down and is starving to death. The mother delivered this child in the lone remaining room of a house that was destroyed in Khan Yunis. She delivered this child with 11 other family members in that room. And this child, you can see the ribs through the skin. You can see the labored breaths. You can hear the weak cry of hunger because they don't have enough energy to be able to ask for a feeding, to do that normal cry that we hear. And the mother's not able to produce milk because there's been no food that has entered. And we sit there knowing that the stuff that we need in order for this child to have a chance at life is right outside of the border, kilometers away. And I remind everybody that this child, every day that we deprive this child of the formula, of the milk that it needs to survive, is every day that even if they miraculously survive, even if there's a ceasefire deal tomorrow, that their future is compromised, their development is suffering irreversible damage. Their mental development, their physical development, their immune system. And so I ask that we consider these people, that we consider them when we start talking about the need for aid to enter. That we think about them when we say that the bombs need to stop dropping. And let us be honest. And I think we've mentioned this, but it's important to hold ourselves accountable just as much as it is important to hold the Israelis accountable. I speak on behalf of the international humanitarian community. We have to see where we failed. It's time for us to think and consider increasing the international presence in Gaza to make sure that we are standing there, not as a line of defense for Palestinians. I mean, don't get it twisted. It's a line of defense for the rest of us, for all of humanity, to make sure that the hospitals in Gaza are protected, is to make sure that the hospitals everywhere else are protected. And when a hospital goes out of commission, just like European Gaza Hospital is now out of commission, it's not just the patients that were there in that moment. It's all of the other patients that will need those services in the coming weeks and days, the kids that need to be vaccinated against polio, and the mothers who need to deliver their children, and the fathers who need to get dialysis. All of these people are at risk of death. And I'll conclude with one last thought. In Gaza, we saw the past of Palestinians being erased. Our museums, our universities, our hospitals, our clinics, 90% of schools have been damaged that need major reconstruction. Right now, we see our present is being compromised. Healthcare workers are being killed. Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya is still languishing away in an Israeli dungeon without any charges against him, a leader in pediatric health. We need him in Gaza treating patients. We don't need him behind Israeli bars. And we're seeing our future being eliminated. We saw the fertility clinic be bombed. We are watching our children be dismembered, disfigured, disappeared. We are ruining the chance to have these beautiful children grow up and serve society, serve Palestinian society, and serve humanity at large. And so, again, I just ask that we consider what are the things that we can do tonight and tomorrow? What are the ways that we can apply pressure to make sure that all sorts of aid is getting in, not just food packages at distribution centers? And I hope that all of us can consider how we can play a role with respect to access. Let us reconnect Gaza to the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Let us make sure children who need cancer treatment can go to hospitals in Jerusalem or in the West Bank rather than spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to get them out of the Gaza Strip with no guarantee that they'll ever be able to return. Let Palestinians be treated by Palestinians. Palestinian doctors can take care of Palestinian children. They are very capable, and I've met with many of them. And so maybe there's an opportunity for us to support Palestinian institutions, to stand in solidarity with them, to fund them, to make sure that they have an opportunity to treat their people. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ahmad, for sharing your experience with us. That's a very powerful, moving, and very convincing intervention. Thank you. Next, Rabbi, please.
With the help of the Almighty, my name is Rabbi Yisrael David Weiss of Neturei Karta International, Jews United Against Zionism. I am here representing, with God's help, the voice of Jews from the streets of Al-Quds, of Jerusalem, and throughout the world. And I pray to the Almighty that He should bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may convey His message and so sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. Amen. It is critical to understand that we are witnessing this 77 years of Nakba because the world has bought into a falsehood. They believe that we are witnessing a war between peoples, between religions, between Arabs and Jews, between Muslims and Jews, between Islam and Judaism. That is critical to understand, that this is a misnomer, that this understanding is totally a falsehood. It's bogus. The Jewish religion is a religion of 3,000 years to be subservient to God. It is to accept the Torah, the covenant, and that does not permit us to kill or steal. In fact, 2,000 years ago, there was the destruction of the temple, King Solomon's temple, and then the second, and we were under oath by God that we are, furthermore, since then, we are not permitted to reestablish even 1 centimeter of Jewish sovereignty, even in a desolate land, and certainly not by killing or stealing, and certainly not to people who were kind and embraced the Jews, as we've had throughout the last hundreds of years, where the Muslim and Arab communities took in the Jews, and we were able, without any human rights groups to protect us, we flourished amongst them. And although we had a distinctly different religion, we coexisted and were able to produce the greatest rabbinical authorities. And I will quote, at the time when Zionism was attempting to establish a so-called Jewish state, a state of Israel, the Torah authorities, who is the leader of a religion, something called Judaism? It's the rabbis, it's the Torah authorities. So there's 2 different parts of Judaism, the Ashkenazic Jews of Europe and the Sephardic Jews, the ones of the Middle East and the Sephardic countries, now in African countries, the ones from the Ashkenazic countries, which were being led in Palestine by Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Dushinsky of blessed memory, pleaded with the United Nations. It's in the United Nations documents. And I'm quoting him. He said, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine, July 16th, 1947, prior to the establishment, to the ratification of the state." And from the Sephardic community, I'm just going to quote, I was this last week in Morocco, Rabbi Yisro Abu Chatzira, who was called Baba Sali, from 1890 to 1984, well before the state of Israel, and then living in Jerusalem. And he said, "I hereby join the great rabbis of the Sephardic Eidah Chareidis in the holy city of Jerusalem in support of their Torah ruling that it is forbidden to participate in the governmental elections because it is against our holy Torah." We have witnessed that this beautiful, the world body, the United Nations that was created in order to be able to adjudicate world conflicts without death and suffering. One of the first moves they did was they ratified this state of Israel. But another thing they did was they approved, they were able to go along for tens of years with apartheid. And they referred to their ambassadors as His Excellency. The ones who opposed them were terrorists. You see, the world body could make a colossal mistake, with all due respect. We are witnessing the ratification of the State of Israel, which was led by Theodore Herzl, but Ben-Gurion called out the State of Israel, the Declaration of Independence, when none of them were covering their heads. They were calling it a Jewish state, the Star of David, Israel, while the rabbis, the authorities leading the Jewish communities universally, everyone, all their different styles, said this is bogus, it's unacceptable. We cannot witness murder of a people or taking the land away from our brothers and sisters, the Palestinian people, their oppression, what we have heard. I don't have to go, the time doesn't permit, of course, the terrible stories that we're hearing. Our hearts are crying because we are Jews. We are demanding, we are pleading, with the world leadership that they should not forsake God, the Torah. They should not forsake the bond that they've made with the Almighty, that there is a ruler of the world, and that the international law, which is predicated, which is built into compassion, that there's an Almighty on the world. And they're claiming, the state of Israel, that they have the right to this land because it's given to them by God. And on top of that, they are accusing anybody who opposes them as being anti-Semitic, while in the truth is they are the personification and the identification of anti-Semitism, because we were living together. We were not dying. We were living as brothers and sisters, as history attests. What changed the introduction of Zionism that caused blood of the Muslims? Now we're talking over 50,000 in this last 2 years, well more than that. But since the 77 years, there is an endless river of blood of Jews also amongst the Zionists. And I'm not talking even about the terrible massacres of the Jews, the ones who are getting arrested because they refuse to serve in the army, and the ones who are getting brutally beaten because they are standing in opposition to Zionism day and night for 77 years. We are witnessing this. The world is silent. The world dare not be silent. This is the reason of the United Nations. They made a mistake by ratifying and agreeing that they can have a state that's called Israel when the name Israel is stolen from the Jews. We have suffered in the Holocaust. They're using the third weapon. They use the Torah, the religion. They're using anti-Semitism, and the third weapon is Holocaust. We are children. My father escaped from the Nazis. The majority of my grandparents died in Auschwitz. My father-in-law, of blessed memory, was in Auschwitz. Our families died as Jews, but we did not take that Holocaust where their ashes, where they proudly died as Jews, to use their ashes to rebel against God and to claim bogusly that we can now oppress another people and steal the land. That is unacceptable. It's against Judaism. Look, you are standing next to Williamsburg, Brooklyn, right across the bridge, the most religious Jewish community here in the United States. Why is there no Israeli flag? People who give their lives for their religion, yet anything that has to do with their religion, they die for. Yet when it comes to Israel, there's not one Israeli flag, because anybody who knows truly the religion knows that Israel is contrary to our religion. It's an evil, and they're killing people, and people are dying, and the world is intimidated. Just in case the world will want to start thinking, because the students are standing up like they did by apartheid. They're standing up, so they're punishing them. They're punishing them by throwing them out of the countries where they're studying in. They're doing, and people are getting arrested. We are pleading with the world leaders. Do not be intimidated. Do not look for the comfort zone that you're in, because tomorrow you may get elected again. Look at that. You're going to have to eventually answer to God, who put you in this lofty position that you have. And we're looking to the United Nations. We are pleading with you. You created the United Nations because there were distinct people who led countries and did tremendous evil. And you stood and you created a United Nations to save from this evil. Do not be misled again. Please, in the name of Judaism, we are pleading in the name of my brothers and sisters, the Jewish people who are true to our religion, who are day and night standing out in the streets and saying, we died so much for Judaism, we died for God. We are pleading with you. Hear our voice. Save the people of Palestine. You must stop it in its tracks. I don't know how, but let us all pray to God, who's all compassionate, almighty, to help them bring this about. But do what you can. You can do. God help, you will do. We hope, inshallah, a free Palestine. Brothers in Palestine, we are crying with you as Jews. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi, for your very compelling intervention. We'll take another comment from the floor before we invite the panelists to respond. Next, Phyllis, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have heard this morning and this afternoon, and we're seeing now that most of our governmental friends have left us. That is, I think, unfortunate, because I think these are messages that governments in particular need to hear. We have heard from our friend Ahmad Massoud and from Dr. Thayer just now about the need, the urgency to change how we approach even these discussions today, last night, last week. Last week was already too late. Today is too late still, and yet we move on. We have to change how, not only how we operate as the United Nations, but also even how we discuss how the UN functions. We heard yesterday from Tom Fletcher, the director of OCHA, who reminded us that sometimes the actual humanitarian work itself can be a distraction from all that needs to be done. The two-state solution discussion can be a distraction from all that needs to be done. The need is urgent for things to happen urgently. One is an arms embargo. We need to make the killing impossible. We know that right now more children are dying from starvation and from lack of water and from lack of medicine to treat treatable diseases than are dying under the bombs. And yet the bombs continue to fall. The bombs are coming from my government. My taxes help to pay for those bombs, those planes, those guns, those tanks. This is an Israeli and American genocide. And I want to raise a challenge, in a sense, to the governments, certainly those that are here, which include those that have made the question of support for Palestinian rights a higher priority in their own work, to examine what will result from this conference in June that a great deal of attention of the UN is going towards right now, to make sure that that conference provides a new answer to what are we doing. Tom Fletcher challenged the UN and challenged the world about what history would ask. History would ask, what will you say? What will history say? What will we say when history asks us, what did we do? And he says, I hope that we will not simply come back and say, we did all we could, because that answer is heard too often in these halls. Sometimes quietly we hear, we did all we could because the U.S. was going to make us pay a price if we did more. And I am urging those governments to stop making their decisions based on fear of what the United States will do to them. Not because it's not a real threat. It is a real threat. It's more dangerous now than it has been in many years. But we cannot stand by and watch the first globally broadcast, globally visible genocide to take place and say we are doing all we can within the parameters that the U.S. government will allow us to do, because they will allow nothing if we demand nothing. If the Security Council vetoes prevent the Security Council from doing its job, so be it. But the Security Council should not be facing a situation where it withdraws a resolution or stops a discussion because it fears there might be a veto. I can promise you, if it's a good resolution, there will be a veto. But make them use the veto. Don't let the veto allow you to pull back and say, we're doing all we can, because you're not. Every country in this organization, in the United Nations, can exercise all of the demands of the International Court of Justice when it gave us essentially a menu of things that need to be done to keep every country in compliance with international law. Not every country will do every one, but every country needs to do all they can based on their own capacity, not based on what the Trump administration says it will allow, because it will allow nothing. So I think those of us in civil society have a little more wiggle room, if you will, to talk about those difficult issues that rarely are named in these halls. But we need to do that. There are lives at stake. There are lives that are being lost as we speak. And if we start with perhaps the most urgent and the most important, and the one that every country can do, impose an arms embargo, a comprehensive arms embargo, meaning no purchase, no sales, no transit, and that includes military use of surveillance equipment that so many governments want to purchase from Israel because they produce some of the best, and they want to use it against their own populations because it's useful. There are numerous ways for civil society to be pressuring governments to end that trade that enables the Israeli genocide to continue. My government is paying 40% of the Israeli military budget, and yet we are told there's not enough money for school and for health care and for child care, et cetera. So my question for panelists who may want to comment and for governments to consider is, what do we do to make sure that this conference that is getting a great deal of attention, of resources, of the United Nations and of member states, what will it come out with that will have an impact on the ground today? What will prevent it from being somehow the child, the next generation of the 1991 Madrid conference that had a major international conference followed by working groups, each led by 2 governmental representatives that met in capitals all around the world and discussed settlements and refugees and water and the environment and produced nothing? How do we prevent that from happening again? I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pennies, for that very thought-provoking intervention. I think now we can invite the panelists to respond to the comments made so far. Maybe we start with Ms. Yevin Maya.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just maybe to follow up some of what Phyllis was saying. Honestly, I was surprised that so many member states were missing, and I feel that kind of like, as part of civil society, as an activist, that kind of feels like the relationship we're used to, and it's upsetting. And I really urge everyone here, the member states that are present and those who are not, and maybe will hopefully watch this later, to be brave, to push yourself forward. I mean, we're doing it. We're being as brave as we can, and Zochot, and as part of activists in Israel, we are advocating with the Israeli society. We're pushing ourselves forward, and we're trying to be as brave as possible. So I really urge you all to take a step forward and do that, and use all the power that you can. And really just to, again, repeat some things I said in the statement, but regarding the two-state solution, I think we should all kind of maybe free ourselves from talking about state solution, but rather about the basic human rights we're talking of. And again, in the conference, if you're participating, if you can shape some of the conversations there, please remember that you should be consulting with us, with civil society, with the refugees, with Palestinians. Please remember to include the right of return in any solution, any thought of a future. We're every day thinking, what will our next day be? And the Palestinians in Gaza, they cannot even imagine what the next minute will look like. But we really need to take matter into our own hands and shape our future. So come to us. Don't shape our future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Yevin. Perhaps Ms. Hassan, do you want to say anything?
Yeah. Thanks. You know, I want to address the issue around the aid modality, and I also want to talk about the fierce urgency of now, getting things done now to save lives, versus other comments that I've heard about, you know, what's the value of the June meeting, and what's to be done, and what role should the civil society play, what role should states play, and does it even matter? I think this issue, Dr. Thaed, of the aid, control over the aid, is really dangerous. And I think the proper address for pushing back against that is the United Nations. There have been statements of concern, statements, talking about it in terms of the practicalities of it and whether that's, really the best way to distribute aid, rather than talking about what it is. And it's an attempt to, it's another tactic, another tool to encourage the flight of Palestinians, to really ethnically cleanse Gaza and to make life further unlivable. So I think it needs to be called out for what it is, and the body to do that is this body, and we as civil society have to really push to make people more brave in this body, because I do think it's really, really a dangerous move. On the issue of the June meeting, there's a lot of critique that we could have about what could we possibly expect from this meeting, the skepticism I think is warranted. I mean, we've been having so many rounds of peace talks, so many rounds of so many different initiatives, and led by states, led by contact groups, led by multilateral organizations, and it hasn't brought us closer to a just peace. I think it comes back and it puts the onus on civil society. What can we do to make sure that the various different working groups are working? What can we do to ensure that what happens in June is actually going to get us an end to war in Gaza, or an end to the ethnic cleansing that we see taking place throughout the occupied territories and the destruction of the refugee camps? What can we do? I don't know that I have seen a coalition of civil society organizations, including civil society in the United States and in other countries around the world, organizing around it. But I think it's worth something to organize around, because you have countries talking about what they can do, important countries in Europe that are coming, that are chairing, that are saying that they are there for action. So how can we make sure that they actually come there with a menu that we are pushing to get meaningful policy change? So I think the onus is going to fall on civil society, because if we don't bond together internationally, it is going to come to nothing. It's going to be another convening, another show, and nothing will result from it. So unfortunately, that's where we are with that. And but I do think it's worthwhile, and I think we have to do both. We have to both do the now, stop the killing, get aid surged in, get doctors in, get the injured out. And I totally agree with you about sending patients to the West Bank. There is a huge danger of Palestinians being allowed out with their families for medical care, who will never be allowed to return. That's why Israel's facilitating the use of the Ramon airport and now welcoming extended family members to travel with the wounded, because the idea is to start there with removing Palestinians and to upscale it later for the rest of the Palestinian population. So we need to keep our eye on these things, and we need to figure out strategies as civil society to raise awareness about it and to ensure that the UN is calling that out.
Thank you, Ms. Hassan. Perhaps, Skarup, do you want to respond to the comments made so far?
Okay, there we go. I can comment briefly. I think what we are dealing with right now is a great and unusual challenge to some extent. We are dealing on one hand with a genocide that is unfolding, and the urgency of aid and relief and ending the violence. At the same time, we're looking at almost 8 decades of oppression against an entire population that needs to be addressed once and for all. And I think working on those two things in parallel is a challenge because of the limited resources and attention span and so on. But it's important to not lose sight of the long-term implications of what is happening in Gaza right now and genocidal war and its relationship with the ongoing Nakba that's taking place in Palestine. I want to reiterate and share Phyllis's concerns and questions about this June international conference. We've seen this movie before. I share the concern that it might produce a second 30 years of cover for the Israeli occupation and the Israeli crimes, and allow Israel to continue to control the Palestinian territories and evade accountability under the banner of whatever this solution might be. And I would reiterate Ambassador Mansour's comments that the key word here is action. We've heard too many statements, and the only thing that is needed is action.
Thank you, Ms. Karup. I think we have another request, two more requests. Please, from the floor.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Sue Ream. I am one of the co-chairs of the Israel-Palestine NGO Working Group, a group that was established about 25 years ago of some 20 or more NGOs here with accreditation who've been working on upholding UN resolutions on Palestine and working towards a common goal of just and durable peace in Israel-Palestine. Thank you to all the panelists for your presentations and for the committee for putting on this event and for allowing, engaging with civil society on this most important and urgent issue. I think as Ms. Maya Yavin has stated, there is a continued erasure of the Palestinian people, the forced displacement, and the catastrophe and the humanitarian needs cannot be described. And so my question actually is specifically for Ms. Yavin, in terms of, because you have come actually at a really personal safety is an issue for you because you will be going back to Israel. So thank you so much for your courage for being here. And the question that I have for you is, what are some of the challenges that Zakrot faces from Israeli society or the state when promoting narratives that counter Zionist frameworks? And how do you engage with Jews in Israel in conversations about decolonization and shared futures with Palestinians? Thank you.
Thank you, Zureen. Next, take another question.
Thank you, Chair. I'm David Wildman with Global Ministries of the United Methodist Church, and I'm also the other co-chair of the NGO Working Group on Israel and Palestine with my colleague Sureem. I want to thank the committee and also the panelists here today. I also want to thank the members of the committee that are actually present in the room, because I think that's that's the chance to have conversation at this most critical and urgent time, as our panelists have said, and as people are killed, including Ahmed's family, even today. I want to go back to 1948. When UNRWA was established, it was one of two mechanisms, as we look towards the June conference for mechanisms. The other mechanism was a political commission that was never empowered to address the political solutions, and so we had only the very urgent humanitarian side, UNRWA. And so it seems to me that this June conference, if it's going to make any difference, and I would love to hear the panelists' thoughts on this, must be that political commission of the General Assembly and its members to do the political work of ending the atrocities that are happening and establishing justice and protecting rights for all Palestinians inside 48 in the occupied Palestinian territory and the refugees. And so I'd like to ask about the right of return. But I'd also like to just suggest that maybe we could declare, and I would love the committee if you can take it, I don't know if it's appropriate they could take an action at the end of a consultation, but I would recommend that the committee adopt a resolution that this consultation with civil society is the first preparatory meeting for the June conference, and that next Friday will be when the member states gather, because we are hearing tremendous, powerful voices from human rights advocates, from Palestinians, from internationals and others. And we need to acknowledge that that's what's needed to make a difference right now. The people on the ground and in the streets are much louder than sometimes those of us here in the room. And so I'd like to ask each of you, if there were Palestinian refugees that were on each of the working groups for the June conference, what would be the priorities and urgent needs that they would be putting to that conversation? And to the member states, Chair, I would invite for you and others to be thinking about what do you need to hear and what do you need to do to enable the voices of Palestinian refugees to be front and center in the deliberations of this body, because the first words of the Charter are "we the peoples" of the United Nations. And so I congratulate the folks that are here today, but I also hope that you will talk to your colleagues on the committee and make sure there's strong governmental representation tomorrow, because we have more panels tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Yeah, thank you for that recommendation. Of course, I will discuss with other members of the committee, but I think on the rest of the questions that have been raised, perhaps maybe Ms. Yevin Maya, you can respond.
Yeah, thank you for the questions, Sue and David. Immediately after October 7th, the already hyper-militarized society I live in became hyper militarized. The amount of weapons you could see on the street until today is unimaginable. The safety, I think, of everyone is at question. Of course, at most, the safety of Palestinians in Gaza and also in the West Bank and 48. We say in Hebrew, we talk a lot about the people who woke up after October 7th. So they were leftists and then woke up to be right-wing and violent. But I just think the masks came off. And I think the events of October 7th kind of gave excuse to people to act in revenge and to speak in revenge. And that is why Zechot's work is so crucial, because we are the only clear voice that talks about Zionism as colonialism and talks about decolonization, not as a tool to kick anyone out to the sea, not Palestinians, not Jews, but actually for real liberation and justice and equality for everyone, as I said in the statement. So it's been a real challenge in the past almost 20 months to speak with Israeli society. We've had ups and downs, but look, Zechot has been 20 years around. Sadly, the ongoing Nakba will probably continue, and we will need Zechot in the future. And I'm sure it'll go up and down with how we communicate with the Israeli society. But we have to continue. We have to really hold the society accountable. That's our job, and that's why I'm there, working there, and that's why I was part of the community for a few years now. Regarding the government, so as you know, the government is becoming increasingly right-wing extremist, and somehow democracy that at least Jews benefited from is slowly also deteriorating. And so now, for example, there's the NGO law that is being passed to really minimize in a lawful way the civic society, civic space. So we're being defunded as we speak. And that is just to erase our existence. And what can you do? You need money to have us working. So definitely it's been challenging also on that front. And just maybe to speak a bit about the right of return that David mentioned, I mentioned as well before. Look, we've been trying different solutions and resolutions for almost 8 decades. Nobody's ever tried the right of return, although it's part of the core identity of Palestinians. When you ask a Palestinian where they're from, they're probably going to say the original place they were displaced from in 48. And that is crucial for everyone to understand. And also for people in Gaza. 70% of them, as I said, or over 70%, are displaced refugees from 48. And they're now being displaced again. A lot of people are being refugees, double refugees. And yes, we need an immediate stop to the genocide. We need immediate humanitarian aid, but we also need to look at the day after tomorrow. In Israel, the right, the extremists, are talking all the time about the day after tomorrow, and they're implementing it. There's settlements in Gaza and in Lebanon that are endorsed by the government and by our military. And we at the left, we don't talk about the day after tomorrow, and we really need to do that. And it's not just the left, it's us envisioning, again, a liberated Palestine. And it has to include the right of return. So, yeah. Thank you.
Yes, Miss. Yeah, Zaha, please.
I just wanted to associate myself with the comments that were made by David Wildman on making sure that the working groups and the entire, agenda and mechanisms that are a part of the June meeting are publicized so that in advance of that meeting, there could be submissions made, there could be opportunities for civil society to have inputs into the working groups. At this point, I don't think many people have any knowledge of what the working groups are, what their specific topics are that they're covering. So having I don't know if there exists one, but having a website in advance of that meeting in which there's ways for civil society to be engaged with the different working groups, I think would be a really great thing.
Thank you. So, Tamara, please.
I don't really have much to add. I just want to reiterate what Zaha said. It would be good to have some more information about this famous June meeting that we've been hearing about. And I think it's important to engage civil society, even though we should not put the burden on civil society organizations who are already underfunded and under-resourced and pressed. But it's important to involve civil society organizations and involve Palestinians, the Palestinian people, not just governments, even though this is a governmental institution. In terms of the refugees and the right of return, I just want to add that Israel has managed and succeeded in fragmenting the Palestinian populations, whether geographically or in other parts, and also has fragmented the refugee population. Palestinian refugees, there's 5.9 million, I think, registered with UNRWA who are eligible for services, but also, some estimates like Badil Resource Center say that there are at least 9 million Palestinians who are refugees, whether in historic Palestine, in the Arab countries in the region, or as part of the diaspora around the world. And they have rights too. So I think it's important to also account for the larger refugee population when we're talking about the Palestinian refugees.
Thank you, Tamara. Is there any more requests from the floor? Yes, please. Lady.
Thank you. Can you hear me? My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam. I am an accredited journalist here at the United Nations. I am a former UN staff as well, and I am a lecturer at Rutgers University. I want to commend and say a few good words about the speech of Tom Fletcher on Tuesday. He was the first UN senior official to put his finger on what happened in Gaza, and he came so close to call it genocide. No other UN official dared to mention this term. And my question is addressed to the committee itself. Do you follow what these senior officials are saying or doing? Do you know what Sigrid Kaag is doing? Where is her voice of what's happening in Gaza? Where is Virginia Gamba, who was in charge of the children in armed conflict? She gave a briefing in the Security Council. She didn't mention Gaza. She talked about children in Sudan. And the ambassador of Libya asked her, how could you talk about children in Sudan, but not about children in Gaza? And she's rewarded now, and she was given the job of also the special expert, a special advisor on genocide, because her predecessor, Alice Nderitu, went and visited Israel 2 weeks and a half, and she stopped in Ramallah, and she gave this strange report about atrocities committed by Palestinians, not mentioning what happened to the Palestinian women. Where are these senior officials? Why the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, is hardly ever heard anything from her? Where are other officials who in charge of this? Where is the UN women? Why we don't hear from them? There is something wrong going on here in the UN. People are being annihilated. There is a genocide going on in Gaza now, and we hear something here and there, and talking about October 7, October 7, October. History did not start on October 7, as Khalid Khiari started today with his speech about October 7. The Secretary General only once mentioned on October 24, 2023, when he mentioned that October 7 did not come from vacuum, and everything broke loose against him. They asked him to resign. Did the atrocities committed against the Palestinians start only on October 8? Didn't Gaza was under siege for 17 years? Isn't occupation lasted for 56 years before October 7? Why senior UN officials don't refer to that? So I really address the committee to do their tracking and to see if those senior officials are saying truth to power or just trying to mingle in the middle and try not to say truth as it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, next. Lady. Yes.
مساء الخير. شكرا. اسمي ميسون بدوي. أنا فلسطينية عايشة بحدود 48. نعم، للي بيعرفش في تقريبا مليون أو أكثر من مليون فلسطيني عايشين داخل إسرائيل. يعني بدي أثني أنا أشغل منصب إدارة جمعية رئيسة إدارة جمعية ذاكرات زخروت. بدي هيك أرجع شوي للي حكى ديفيد عن المؤتمر اللي راح يعقد بشهر 6. بس قبل هيك بدي أقول إنه باللحظات هاي اللي إحنا قاعدين فيها هون واللي بنحكي واللي بنناقش، طبعاً يمكن حكوا الزملاء والأصدقاء هون عن هذا الموضوع، بس هيك بحب هأكد إنه حالياً عم بينقتلوا وعم بيستشهدوا عم بيتذبحوا أطفال فلسطينية بغزة، وعم بينولد كمان جيل كبير، جيل لاجئين. أنا من 48 بسنة 1948 تهجرت أكثر من نصف من عائلتي على دول مجاورة، لبنان، سوريا إلى آخره. بدي هيك هقول ملاحظة اللي هي يمكن شوي أتذكر القيمين على المؤتمر بشهر 6 واللي رايحين يشتركوا بالحلقات. فيش إمكانية يكون في حل للمصيبة اللي إحنا موجودين فيها بدون حل عادل للاجئين الفلسطينية، وبدون الحق العودي لأقارب اللي موجودين بالشتات، ولكل فلسطيني لاجئ يرجع. بدون هيك صعب إنه يكون في حل عادل. شكراً.
Thank you. Anybody want to respond? Maya, please.
I don't have any more to add. I think Maisun, my colleague, said it perfectly. So I don't have any more comments. Thank you.
Zaha, do you want to add? No. Tamara, yes, please.
I'll just comment on the gentleman's intervention about the disregard for Palestinian life that has been so normalized for decades that somebody's silencing me. When October 7th happened, the outrage that we've seen across the globe, we have never heard when Palestinians were being massacred and displaced and dispossessed and tortured and raped for decades. And I think this is part of the larger pattern of dehumanization that I spoke about. And I think it continues to persist today. And we need to take serious measures to address this normalization of dehumanization and anti-Palestinian racism.
Thank you. Perhaps I should address what has been raised just now. I think as member states and also members of the committee, we also want to hear more statements, bold statements from all UN senior officials. And we are engaging them consistently. We have engagement with the Secretary General periodically. This is something that we always champion, and we will continue to do that. But we hear you and we understand where you're coming from. This is something that we need to consistently, work and put more effort into. Perhaps before, if there is no more requests from the floor, maybe I should invite our distinguished representative of the State of Palestine to also express her views. Thank you. Fida, please.
Thank you, Chair, Ambassador Faisal. And I just wanted to take a moment before we end this discussion and this meeting to express our profound thanks to all of the esteemed panelists. I know that Ahmed is not with us, but I do want to thank him for his extremely moving testimony and to express our profound and deepest condolences to him and to his family. And also to thank Maya and Zaha and Tamara for their powerful statements and the very incisive insights that you've shared, both in your statements and in your responses to the other interventions. And I also wanted to thank Dr. Thaer as well for his moving testimony and his continual advocacy and appeal for action, appealing to the basic humanity that many seem to have lost. And also thank you to the Rabbi for his intervention, and to Phyllis and to all who have contributed to this really important and vital discussion, and to also recognize the few delegations that have taken the time to remain with us here today, that your presence is recognized and appreciated. I agree that the voices of civil society do need to be heard by member states. The appeals for action need to be heard, and all countries, whether sitting on the Security Council or if they are going to be chairing the working groups for the upcoming international conference, all states concerned with the plight of the Palestinian people, with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with ending the genocide, with ending the illegal occupation, should be here, listening to these testimonies, to the expertise that you are sharing, to the recommendations, and to the appeals that are being made. And so we are fortunate that the Division for Palestinian Rights, as the secretariat of this committee, has ensured the webcasting of these consultations. And that thousands are viewing online, including delegations and the wider public in the international community, and that these discussions will continue to be accessed online. And so your statements will have resonance far beyond the numbers in this room. I did want to make, just to respond to some of the remarks concerning the two-state solution and the international conference. And of course, the utmost priority at this moment is ending the genocide, halting the genocide being perpetrated by Israel against the Palestinian people. The international conference is but one of many efforts to halt the erasure of Palestine and the Palestinian people. It is not, it may not convey the sense of urgency that is needed right now for the kind of international action to stop the genocide, but it is addressing the long-term viability, the future of the Palestinian people in the face of this erasure. And we are deliberate in our insistence on Palestinian existence, on our right to self-determination, to freedom, on our insistence on equality, on our insistence on rights, on international law, and on the international legal framework for the existence of both states. And at the core of the international conference has to be a message that Palestine was, it is, and it will be. And the international conference focus on salvaging the two-state solution is again confronting a blatant Israeli strategy and objective to eradicate Palestinians and eradicate Palestine. And we cannot allow that, not on the ground and not in the international sphere as we exist in this global community, in this global family. And we all know that this eradication is taking place every single day in the most violent and nefarious ways. In the genocide, this blatant annihilation campaign we have been witnessing for the past 19 months in Gaza, in the ethnic cleansing across occupied Palestine, in the daily colonization and the annexation, in the so-called Israeli legislation, in the endless dehumanization that and the anti-Palestinian racism that, Tamara, you have referred to, this endless dispossession and displacement of Palestinians and devastation of Palestinian society by Israel, justified as so-called self-defense. And the pushback against that every single day is something that this committee does, and I think that will be front and center in the international conference. And as Minister Mansour said, this conference must be different than past peace processes, and it is about action. It is about ending the illegal occupation in every manifestation and ending this historic and grave injustice. And that is what we are seeking simultaneously as we pursue accountability for Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people. And this, our engagement and our call for this international conference, the General Assembly called for it, is not at the expense of other action. It is concurrent with it. We remain actively engaged at the International Court of Justice. We were in the advisory opinion proceedings that resulted in the ICJ advisory opinion in July 2024, and we were again in the recent advisory proceedings active at the International Criminal Court and in all UN organs, whether at the Security Council, the General Assembly, the Human Rights Council, or any other forum. And we continue to act every single day at the United Nations and in the run-up to the conference and beyond to safeguard the rights of our people, the rights of the refugees, including to return, the right of all Palestinians to self-determination and to life. And those rights are at the heart of a peaceful settlement for the question of Palestine, and they are fundamental to the basis for the international conference, again, that was called for by the General Assembly in Resolution ES 1024, which was adopted in follow-up to the ICJ advisory opinion of July 2024. And so that is actually the legal foundation for that resolution and for the conference. The conference can't be detached from what the court said, that this is an illegal occupation and that it has to end, that the Palestinian people have inalienable rights, including to self-determination. And the conference is just one of many operational provisions that has to be implemented, including the call for arms embargo, settlement boycott, and all other legitimate diplomatic, political, legal, economic measures that must be taken in accordance with international law. And again, everything is done concurrently. In addition to the efforts to safeguard Palestinian rights, we continue to act every day to alleviate the plight of our people, including by securing humanitarian assistance through UNRWA and other UN agencies, and as a matter, obviously, of utmost urgency to address the catastrophe and the unimaginable human suffering our people are enduring in Gaza, and again, constantly pursuing accountability and to lay the foundations for justice, without which we all know there cannot be peace. And lastly, as stated also by Minister Mansour, I do want to reiterate that we recognize the invaluable role and contribution of civil society, and we want you to continue to make your voices heard and to press on with your outreach and your advocacy, and continue pressing all of us to do more for all states to rise to their responsibilities and to their obligations. We need you to continue making us think, to do better, to do more. And so your recommendations, including Zaha's recommendation regarding a legal definition for the Nakba, all that it has entailed and continues to entail, what this ongoing criminal enterprise is and how it continues to be funded, aided, and abetted, and also your collective recommendations to ensure that human rights are at the heart of the international conference and all that we do in pursuit of justice and freedom for the Palestinian people. All of this is heard and will continue to inform and inspire us as we continue to do whatever we can to be a voice for the Palestinian people here at the United Nations, but also to seek justice for them here at the United Nations. Thank you again, Chair, and thank you to our panelists and to all in attendance today.
Thank you, Fida, for your very comprehensive response to many of the questions that have been raised today. Any more statement from panelists? No. Then I think it's time to conclude our deliberation of Plenary 1. On behalf of the committee, I would like to express our deep appreciation to our distinguished speakers, Maya, Tamara, Zaha. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience from Gaza, Palestine, Israel, Washington, D.C. Many thanks also to all attendants, whether in person or online. Thank you for your contribution to the discussion, and I thank you also for your interest and attention. The committee will resume our consultations with Plenary 2 tomorrow at 10 o'clock in this hall. The meeting now is adjourned. Thank you.